The late afternoon sun bled gold across the sand, turning the gentle waves into liquid amber. From our balcony, the view was postcard perfect, palm trees swaying in a soft breeze, the rhythmic sigh of the ocean, the distant laughter of children building sandcastles. It was supposed to be idyllic, restorative, a chance to reconnect, to bridge the quiet chasm that had opened between Sabrina and me over the past year. But as I watched her walk along the shoreline, her silhouette small against the vast expanse of water, the beauty of the scene felt hollow, almost mocking. Sabrina had always loved the beach. It was where I'd proposed 22 years ago on a wind-swept stretch of coast much colder than this Caribbean paradise. I remembered the way her eyes, the color of warm honey, had sparkled then, full of shared dreams and unwavering certainty. Now, watching her bend to pick up a shell, her movements fluid and graceful as ever, that certainty felt like a relic from another lifetime. The sparkle was still there sometimes, but it rarely seemed directed at me anymore. This holiday had been my idea. Work had been relentless for both of us, me managing the logistics firm I'd built from the ground up, her climbing the ladder in corporate finance. The long hours, the separate business trips, the exhaustion that settled over our evenings had become the norm. We were successful, comfortable, the envy of many of our friends, but somewhere along the way, the threads that bound us had frayed. I'd hoped the sun, the sand, the sheer distance from our everyday pressures might help us mend them. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Sabrina said, joining me on the balcony later. She leaned against the railing, the sea breeze teasing strands of her hair, loose from the elegant knot she'd tied earlier. "It is," I agreed, searching her face for a sign, any sign that she felt it too, the potential for renewal, the echo of the couple we used to be. Her gaze, however, remained fixed on the horizon, a thoughtful, almost distant expression in her eyes that I couldn't quite read. It was an expression I'd seen more frequently lately, one that made me feel like an outsider looking in on her private world. "I might take a walk down to the little craft market before dinner," she said, turning slightly. "See if they have any of those woven bracelets." "Okay," I nodded. "Want company?" She hesitated for just a fraction of a second, a flicker in her eyes I might have missed if I hadn't been watching so closely. "No, you relax," she said, offering a quick, bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I won't be long." She disappeared back into the cool dimness of our suite. I heard the click of her purse, the soft thud of the door closing. Alone on the balcony, the setting sun suddenly felt less golden, more melancholic. That hesitation, however small, snagged at me. It wasn't the first time. There had been other moments, hushed phone calls she ended abruptly when I walked into the room, vague explanations for late evenings, a new habit of guarding her phone screen like it held state secrets. I'd tried to dismiss them. Stress, I told myself. Misunderstandings, the natural erosion that happens in any long marriage. We were just out of sync, tired. But the unease lingered, a low hum beneath the surface of our lives. I trusted Sabrina, or rather, I desperately wanted to trust the Sabrina I had married, the woman I had built a life with. To entertain the alternative felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath my feet. An hour passed. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. The craft market was small, barely a 10-minute stroll down the beach path. She should have been back by now. I picked up my book, trying to focus on the words, but my gaze kept drifting towards the empty doorway. Restlessness gnawed at me. Putting the book down, I decided to walk down and meet her. Perhaps we could have a drink at the beachfront bar, watch the last sliver of sun disappear together. Maybe the casual romance of the setting could coax out the closeness we'd misplaced. I slipped on my sandals and headed out, the warm evening air heavy with the scent of salt and tropical flowers. The path to the market was lit by low-hanging lanterns, casting flickering shadows. As I rounded a bend, I saw the cluster of stalls ahead, vendors packing up their wares for the day. But Sabrina wasn't there. I scanned the remaining handful of tourists, the pathway back towards the hotel. Nothing. A prickle of annoyance mixed with a deeper, colder feeling started in my gut. Where was she? I pulled out my phone, about to call her, when I heard it. Her laugh. Distinctive, musical, the sound I'd fallen in love with. It drifted from further down the beach, beyond the market, from a more secluded stretch, hidden by a rocky outcrop. Curiosity, tinged with that persistent unease, pulled me forward. I walked towards the sound, sticking to the shadows where the path met the sand. As I neared the rocks, I heard voices, hushed but clear in the stillness of the evening. One was Sabrina's. The other was a man's, low and unfamiliar. My heart started a heavy, uneven rhythm against my ribs. I slowed my steps, moving cautiously, staying out of sight, behind a large cluster of sea grape trees. Peeking through the leaves, my breath caught in my throat. Sabrina stood facing away from me, talking to a man. He was tall, lean, dressed in casual linen trousers and a shirt, looking completely at ease. His hand rested lightly on her arm, a gesture of casual intimacy that sent a jolt through me. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could see Sabrina's profile, illuminated by the moonlight, beginning to silver the waves. She was smiling, that genuine, unguarded smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. And then, as I watched, frozen, she leaned in, tilting her head slightly. He mirrored the movement, lowering his head towards hers. The world seemed to stop. The sound of the waves, the rustle of the leaves, the distant music from the hotel, it all faded into a dull roar in my ears. My chest felt tight, constricted, as if the air had suddenly become too thick to breathe. It wasn't just a conversation, it wasn't a chance encounter. The way they stood, the shared look, the magnetic pull between them, it was undeniable. He murmured something, and she laughed again, a soft, intimate sound that twisted like a knife in my gut. Then she reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek before dropping back to her side. It was a small gesture, fleeting, but it screamed familiarity. It screamed history. I stumbled back, away from the sea grape trees, my legs feeling unsteady. Nausea rose in my throat. This wasn't happening. Not Sabrina, not after everything. The image of her hand on his cheek burned behind my eyelids. The sound of her intimate laughter echoed in the sudden deafening silence of my mind. Who was he? How long had this been going on? Was this why she had been so distant? Was this the reason for the hushed calls, the guarded phone, the vague excuses? The questions bombarded me, each one a hammer blow against the carefully constructed walls of denial I hadn't even realized I'd built. I turned and walked back towards the hotel, my steps wooden, mechanical. The beautiful beach, the golden sunset, the romantic getaway. It all felt like a grotesque stage set for a betrayal I hadn't seen coming, even though the signs had been there all along, waiting in the wings. The cliff edge I'd feared standing on, I was already in free fall. Back in the suite, the air felt suffocating. Her scent lingered, the light floral perfume she always wore. A book lay open on her bedside table, a bookmark partway through. Her sandals were kicked off near the door, mundane details of a shared life that now felt utterly alien. I walked over to the mini-fridge, my hands trembling slightly as I pulled out a small bottle of water. I needed something to ground me, something to stop the spinning in my head. Downing the water in 3 long gulps, I paced the room, from the balcony doors to the bed and back again, my mind racing. Every memory of the past year replayed itself, now cast in a harsh, unflattering light. The late nights at the office, were they really about work? The weekend conference calls, who was really on the other end? The sudden need for more personal space, the subtle withdrawing from physical affection, the time she'd seemed lost in thought, a faint smile playing on her lips that had nothing to do with me. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. How could I have been so blind? Had I wanted to be? Had ignoring the signs been easier than facing the potential truth? The man I saw myself as, observant, rational, a good judge of character, felt like a fool. A complacent fool who had mistaken the routine of marriage for unwavering loyalty. Anger began to bubble beneath the shock, hot and acrid. Anger at her for the lies, the deceit, the utter disrespect for our vows, our history, me. Anger at him, the faceless stranger intruding on my life, taking what wasn't his. And anger at myself for letting this happen, for not seeing it, for not fighting harder to bridge the distance before it became an uncrossable ocean. I stopped pacing and stood before the large mirror above the dresser. The man looking back at me seemed older, his face etched with lines of stress I hadn't noticed before. The tan I'd acquired over the past few days couldn't hide the pallor beneath, the shock residing deep in my eyes. Who was I now? Not just a husband, a partner, but a victim of betrayal. The word tasted bitter. The sound of a keycard sliding into the lock made me freeze. My heart leaped into my throat, pounding a frantic rhythm. She was back. The door opened, and Sabrina stepped inside, humming softly to herself. She kicked off her sandals and dropped her small woven bag onto the chair by the door. "Find your bracelets?" I asked, my voice strained, unfamiliar even to my own ears. I turned slowly to face her, trying to keep my expression neutral, though I felt like my insides were being torn apart. She looked up, a bright, slightly forced smile instantly plastering itself onto her face. "Oh, yes. Look," she said, holding up her wrist, displaying a simple, colorful band. "Pretty, isn't it? Took me ages to choose." "Liar!" The word screamed in my head. She hadn't been at the market. She'd been down the beach, laughing with another man, touching his face. The bracelet felt like a prop, a hastily acquired piece of evidence to support her flimsy story. "It's nice," I managed, the compliment feeling like ash in my mouth. She tilted her head, her smile faltering slightly as she studied me. "Are you okay? You look pale." Was I okay? The question was so absurd, so grotesquely out of touch with the reality crashing down around me, that I almost laughed. Pale? I felt like I was disintegrating from the inside out. "Just tired," I lied, mirroring her deception. The ease with which the falsehood slipped out surprised me. Perhaps lying became second nature when you lived immersed in it. Long day in the sun. Ah, right, she nodded, seeming to accept the explanation, perhaps relieved not to probe further. She moved towards the bathroom. I'm going to take a quick shower before dinner. Are we still thinking of that seafood place? Dinner. The thought of sitting across a table from her, making small talk, pretending everything was normal, felt impossible. How could I look at her, knowing what I knew? How could I listen to her voice without hearing the echo of that intimate laughter she'd shared with him? Actually, I said, stopping her before she reached the bathroom door. My voice was low, but it held a new firmness. I think we need to talk. Sabrina froze, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She turned back slowly, apprehension flickering across her features. The carefully constructed mask of casual contentment began to crack. Talk? She repeated, her voice cautious. About what? My gaze held hers. The shock was beginning to recede, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. The freefall was ending, and I was about to hit the ground. About your walk on the beach, I said, letting the words hang in the air, heavy and loaded, and about who you were really meeting. Her eyes widened, just fractionally, but it was enough. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking suddenly fragile, exposed. The carefully maintained facade crumbled, revealing the panic beneath. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, no doubt scrambling for a plausible denial, another lie to add to the pile. But I could see it in her eyes. She knew I knew. The charade was over. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken truths and the wreckage of 22 years. The only sound was the distant, indifferent murmur of the waves outside, witnesses to the quiet devastation unfolding within the four walls of our tropical paradise. Sabrina stood frozen, her hand still hovering near the bathroom doorknob. The quick, shallow rise and fall of her chest was the only movement. Her eyes, usually warm honey, were wide and clouded with a dawning fear I hadn't seen there before. I don't know what you mean," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. It was a weak defense, reflexive, the last gasp of a dying lie. "Don't you?" I kept my voice level, though it took immense effort. Inside, a storm raged, grief, fury, a crushing weight of disappointment. "I saw you, Sabrina, down past the market, by the rocks, with him." The name wasn't necessary. Her sharp intake of breath confirmed it. She took an involuntary step back, bumping lightly against the wall, her gaze darting around the room as if seeking an escape route where none existed. The woven bracelet on her wrist, the one she'd claimed took ages to choose, suddenly seemed garish, a cheap prop in a badly rehearsed play. It's not what you think," she began, the words tumbling out in a rush. "He's just a friend, an old colleague. We ran into each other. We were just catching up." Catching up? The disbelief in my voice was undisguised. "Is that what you call it? Laughing like that? Touching his face? Do you touch all your old colleagues like that, Sabrina?" The image flashed again, her fingers brushing his cheek. Intimate, possessive, a gesture reserved for lovers. Tears welled in her eyes, genuine this time, spilling over and tracing paths down her cheeks. "Mark, please," she pleaded, using my name like an incantation she hoped might dispel the harsh reality between us. "It just happened. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I echoed, the coldness in my tone surprising even myself. How long, Sabrina? How long has this meaningless catching up been going on? She flinched, looking down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. The silence stretched, punctuated only by her quiet sniffles and the relentless rhythm of the waves outside. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with tears. "A while," she admitted softly. "On and off." "On and off," I repeated numbly. The vagueness was another kind of wound. "While we were planning this trip, while we were talking about reconnecting, while I was hoping—" My voice trailed off. Hope felt like a fool's errand now. "Who is he?" She hesitated, wiping furiously at her tears with the back of her hand. "It doesn't matter who he is." "Doesn't matter?" Anger flared, sharp and hot. "It matters to me. The man my wife is meeting secretly on a beach while we're supposed to be fixing our marriage. Yes, Sabrina, that matters." His name is David," she whispered, finally surrendering the piece of information. "We worked together years ago. We reconnected at a conference last fall." Last fall. Months of lies, of stolen moments, of me living in oblivious ignorance while she carried on a separate life. Every business trip she'd taken, every late night she'd blamed on deadlines, every moment of distraction, it all coalesced into a coherent, devastating narrative. So, all this time, I struggled to keep my voice steady. The distance, the arguments, the feeling that I was losing you, it wasn't just stress, was it? It was him. She nodded miserably, fresh tears flowing. "I was confused," she choked out. "Things between us, they haven't been right for so long, Mark. I felt lonely." Lonely. The word struck me. Hadn't I felt lonely too, sitting across from her at dinner tables, shrouded in silence, lying beside her in bed with an unbridgeable gulf between us? But my loneliness hadn't driven me into someone else's arms. So, your solution was to find comfort elsewhere? To betray everything we built? "I didn't plan it," she cried, looking up at me now, her expression pleading. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," I stated, the simple fact hanging between us, heavy and irrefutable. "You chose to, again and again, every time you met him, every time you lied to me. That was a choice, Sabrina." She sank onto the edge of the bed, covering her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Watching her break down didn't bring me satisfaction, only a profound sense of sorrow. The woman I loved, the partner I had trusted implicitly for over 2 decades, was shattered, and she had shattered us in the process. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to rage, to demand more answers, to unleash the torrent of pain inside. Another part wanted to retreat, to escape this room, this island, this entire situation. And a small, treacherous part, buried deep beneath the hurt, felt a flicker of the old instinct to comfort her, to somehow make it okay. I crushed that last impulse ruthlessly. It wasn't my job to fix this. She had broken it. I walked past her, towards the balcony doors, needing air, needing space. Stepping outside, I gripped the railing, my knuckles turning white. The sky was dark now, sprinkled with indifferent stars. The sea whispered its endless secrets to the shore. Below, the lights of the resort twinkled, suggesting happiness and relaxation, a world away from the wreckage in my suite. What now? The question echoed in the emptiness. Could we recover from this? Could trust, once so fundamentally broken, ever be rebuilt? Did I even want it to be? Looking back at Sabrina's weeping form through the glass door, I felt an overwhelming weariness. The fight seemed too monumental, the damage too deep. She had spoken of loneliness, of confusion. Perhaps those feelings were real. Perhaps our marriage had been faltering long before David appeared. But her actions, her choices, had introduced a poison for which I wasn't sure there was an antidote. I stayed out on the balcony for a long time, listening to the waves, letting the cool night air wash over me. Her crying eventually subsided, replaced by a heavy silence from within the room. I didn't go back inside immediately. I needed to think, to process, to simply breathe without the suffocating weight of her presence nearby. The fantasy of the idyllic getaway had dissolved, leaving only the stark reality of our fractured marriage. This wasn't a place for reconnection anymore. It was the scene of the final act. When I finally turned back, Sabrina was sitting exactly where I'd left her, on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the floor. Her face was blotchy, her eyes red-rimmed, but she seemed calmer, resigned. "Mark," she began softly, her voice hoarse, "what are we going to do?" I looked at her, really looked at her, not as the idealized wife of my youth, but as the person she was now, the person who had made these choices. The love I felt was still there, tangled inextricably with the pain, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of finality. "I don't know what we are going to do, Sabrina," I said quietly, the decision solidifying within me even as I spoke. "But I know what I need to do. I can't stay here, not like this." I walked over to the closet and pulled out my suitcase, laying it open on the luggage rack. The simple action felt momentous, definitive. Her head snapped up. "What are you doing?" "I'm going to find another room," I stated, keeping my back to her as I started methodically taking my clothes from the drawers and placing them in the bag. Or maybe another hotel. I haven't decided, but I can't share this space with you tonight. Maybe not ever again. "Mark, no! Please, don't leave," she pleaded, scrambling off the bed and coming towards me. "We can talk this through. We can fix this." I stopped packing and turned to face her, my heart aching, but my resolve firm. Can we? Can we fix the lies? Can we fix the fact that every time I look at you now, I'll see you with him on that beach? Can we fix the trust you shattered? I shook my head slowly. "I don't think we can, Sabrina, and right now, I don't even know if I want to try." Her face crumpled again, but this time I didn't look away. I needed to see it, to acknowledge the depth of the chasm her actions had created. "I need space," I continued, my voice softer but no less final. "I need to figure out what's left. For me, away from you." I closed the suitcase, the click of the latches echoing loudly in the tense silence. I picked it up, along with my carry-on bag, near the door. Sabrina stood helplessly in the middle of the room, tears streaming down her face, making no move to stop me this time. Perhaps she finally understood. At the door, I paused, my hand on the handle. I didn't look back at her. 22 years, I murmured, more to myself than to her. I thought we were building something timeless. Then I opened the door and walked out, leaving behind the wreckage of our marriage in a suite overlooking a beautiful, indifferent sea. The path ahead was uncertain, shrouded in the fog of pain and disillusionment. But as I walked down the brightly lit hotel corridor, away from the life I knew, a strange sense of clarity settled over me. It wasn't relief, not yet. It was the quiet, steely realization that my journey forward, whatever it might hold, would be my own. The betrayal had wounded me deeply, but standing here, taking this first step alone, I knew it wouldn't break me. I would find my way through the storm. The hotel lobby felt unnervingly normal. Soft music played. Couples lingered near the bar, laughing softly. A concierge smiled politely as I approached the front desk. It was a stark contrast to the emotional detonation chamber I had just left. My suitcase wheels rumbled softly on the polished tile floor, a sound that felt disproportionately loud in my own ears. "Good evening," the concierge, a young woman named Sophia, according to her name tag, greeted me warmly. "How may I help you?" "I need a room," I said, the words feeling thick and awkward. "Just for myself. My plans have changed." I avoided her eyes, focusing instead on a display of tour brochures behind her. Sophia handled it with professional discretion, no flicker of surprise or curiosity crossing her face. "Certainly, sir. For how many nights?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "Just start with tonight." She tapped efficiently at her keyboard. The mundane process of checking in, providing my name, swiping a credit card, felt surreal. Here I was, performing the ordinary rituals of travel while my life imploded. Within minutes, she handed me a new key card. "Room 314, sir. It's on the opposite side of the resort, overlooking the gardens. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call." "Thank you, Sophia." I managed a tight smile. Room 314 was smaller than the suite, simpler, but clean and blessedly anonymous. It smelled faintly of lemon polish and clean linen, devoid of Sabrina's perfume or any shared memories. I dropped my suitcase by the door and walked over to the window. Instead of the vast ocean vista, I looked out onto manicured pathways winding through lush tropical foliage, illuminated by soft garden lights. It felt enclosed, quieter, which suited my current state. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the silence pressing in. Alone. Truly alone for the first time in over 2 decades, at least in this profound, relational sense. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation and the check-in process began to ebb, leaving behind a hollow ache. Sabrina's tear-streaked face swam before my eyes. Her words echoed, lonely, confused, didn't mean anything. Had she been lonely? Yes, probably. Had I? Absolutely. Our careers had become demanding, parallel tracks rather than a shared journey. We'd stopped prioritizing us, substituting comfortable routine for genuine connection. I saw that now with painful clarity. But did that justify betrayal? Did our shared neglect excuse her seeking solace, intimacy, validation elsewhere? Number nothing could excuse the deceit, the calculated lies, the violation of the fundamental promise we had made to each other. Her loneliness might have been a reason, a contributing factor, but it wasn't an excuse. She had made a choice, consciously and repeatedly, to step outside our marriage instead of turning towards me, however difficult that might have been. I thought about David, the faceless man on the beach. What did he offer her? Excitement? A listening ear? An escape from the comfortable, perhaps stagnant reality of our long-term partnership? It didn't matter. He was a symptom, not the root cause, but his presence had irrevocably altered the landscape of my life. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen. Sabrina. I ignored it. It buzzed again a few minutes later. I silenced it, placing it face down. I couldn't talk to her now. I didn't know what I would say, and I suspected anything I did say would be fueled by a pain too raw to be constructive. I showered, letting the hot water cascade over my head and shoulders, hoping it might wash away some of the numbness, the shock. It didn't, but the simple ritual provided a momentary distraction. Afterwards, I pulled on a fresh shirt and shorts, feeling the need to get out of the room, to walk, to breathe air that wasn't thick with recirculated grief. I found myself drawn back towards the beach, though I stayed near the main resort area, far from the rocky outcrop that now felt like sacred, violated ground. The moon was higher now, casting a silvery path across the dark water. The waves continued their ceaseless rhythm, pulling back and rushing forward, erasing footprints in the sand, indifferent to the human dramas played out on their shores. Sitting on a deserted lounge chair, I stared out at the vast darkness. The future felt like that ocean, immense, unknowable, potentially treacherous. Rebuilding a life alone at my age wasn't something I had ever contemplated. Our identities had been intertwined for so long, Mark and Sabrina. Who was I just as Mark? The thought wasn't entirely terrifying. Amidst the pain, there was a flicker of something else. Not hope exactly, but autonomy. The decisions from here on out were mine alone. I didn't have to factor in Sabrina's desires, her deceptions, her needs. I could focus solely on my own healing, my own path. Would I go home immediately, cut the disastrous holiday short? Part of me wanted to flee, to put physical distance between myself and this place, this pain. But another part felt that running wouldn't solve anything. The problem wasn't the location, it was the reality I carried within me. Perhaps staying, at least for a day or two, keeping my distance but allowing myself time to think in this neutral space, was the better option. I wouldn't see her. I wouldn't answer her calls. I would use this time, this unwelcome solitude, to start processing, to begin mapping out the first steps on this new, unwanted journey. Forgiveness felt like a distant, perhaps unreachable shore. Reconciliation seemed impossible. Right now, all I could focus on was navigating my own survival. As the first hint of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, painting the horizon in pale shades of gray and pink, I stood up. My legs were stiff, my eyes gritty from lack of sleep, but my mind felt clearer, calmer. The storm inside hadn't passed, but the initial fury had subsided, leaving a landscape of sorrow, yes, but also resolve. I walked back towards my anonymous garden view room. Sabrina had made her choices, and now I had made mine. Leaving the suite, leaving her weeping figure, hadn't been an act of anger as much as an act of self-preservation. It was the end of the life we knew, the end of the trust that had bound us. It hurt more than words could express, a deep, tearing wound. But as I walked away from the shoreline, away from the scene of betrayal, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that it was also a beginning, the beginning of finding my own way back to solid ground. The path was long, but I would walk it, alone,